All right, you guys, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's just going to be the basics of bonds, explaining how those work. They can be a really powerful tool that you add to your portfolio. Let's jump right into it. The best way to really describe a bond is it's like a post-dated check. I have some future date that's going to pay out some certain amount. Most bonds usually come in a $10,000 increment, and I can go buy this bond today for some price on the open market from somebody else that's selling it. Now, you might notice that this bond doesn't mature for 8 more years. It could have been originally a 10-year bond, a 20-year bond, or even possibly a 30-year bond. What on earth is going to convince somebody to go buy this bond if it doesn't even mature for 30 years? Easy. What they'll do is they'll also oftentimes include a coupon. They'll state the coupon with an annual percentage rate, and then they'll pay that coupon out semi-annually. So in this example, every September and then 6 months later, in March, they'll pay out $150. This is buying a bond at a discount. $9,000 is less than the $10,000 maturity value or par value. Sometimes I'd be willing to buy a bond at a premium. That means I'm paying more for the bond than what it's actually going to mature at. In this example, $11,000 to only receive $10,000 in some future date. Why on earth would anybody ever do that? The reason why is because of the coupon. Let's say the coupon's 10% in this example. That means every September and March, they're receiving $500. And so you do the math on it, it can actually make a lot of sense. What are my concerns with owning bonds? Number one, I'm always concerned if the company defaults. What does that mean if they default? That means they miss a coupon payment. Similarly, if anybody misses a credit card payment or any sort of obligation where they owe somebody money and they miss that payment, then what happens? They go into default. Now, can that person come out of default, or that business or company come out of default? Yes, they can come out of default. But what happens to their credit score or their rating? Well, it's a big black eye. So they don't want to ever miss those payments and go into default. Another concern is if they go bankrupt. That means they close their doors. They're no longer operating as a business, or they start going through the bankruptcy proceedings. Here in the United States, we have the bankruptcy laws, and there's a pecking order on who gets paid off first. One nice thing about being a bondholder versus a stockholder is when I'm a bondholder, I'm higher up on that pecking order. Typically, it seems like we see a bondholder collects about 50% of what the maturity value is. So rather than receiving $10,000, they may receive $5,000. The fortunate thing is they've also been able to collect, hopefully, these coupons along the way. Another thing that is really important when it comes to purchasing bonds is that we properly diversify the portfolio. Don't put all your money inside one particular company or in one bond. We want to make sure we diversify those bonds out. One, because of the risk of default or bankruptcy. But another reason is we like laddering them. So that way you have different maturity dates. So I might have a bond that matures in 1 year or 3 years or 5 years and 10 years, but some period, incremental period of time. Next, I'd like to talk about interest rates and bonds. The fair market value, what I'm paying or what I could sell my bond for on the open market, works inversely to interest rates. So when the Fed lowers interest rates, what happens to the fair market value of my bonds? Well, the fair market value of my bonds is going to go up. Why? Because I've already locked in a higher interest rate than what people can get out in the marketplace. However, if interest rates go up, then the current fair market value of my bonds is going to go down. Why? Because people can get a higher interest rate out in the market than what your bond is paying. And so the fair market value adjusts accordingly to try to make it commensurate with what's going on in the marketplace. That's important to recognize. Why? Because for the last 40 years, we have watched interest rates take a precipitous decline. And then this year, in 2022, we've watched interest rates go up quite significantly from the Federal Reserve. If I own my bonds directly, does that bother me when my fair market value goes down because of the Fed raising interest rates? The answer is no. Why? Because I already know what my interest rate is. However, if I own those bonds via a bond fund, does that bother me? Yes, I should be terrified. That typically is not advantageous for me as a bondholder if I own them via a bond fund. But if I own them directly, in an interesting way, I actually welcome that and I cheer on the Fed. I appreciate it. The reason is because I can hold my bonds to maturity, and then when they mature, I can go buy a new bond at a higher interest rate. However, if I hold them via a bond fund, then I have commingled my money with all these other investors. And I cannot control when this other investor in the bond fund decides that they want their money. And they force the fund manager to go sell that bond prematurely. And now all of us inside the fund take a hit on it. Bonds are super powerful. I absolutely love bonds. I think that they can be a really powerful tool inside people's portfolio. However, we always want to make sure that we're structuring them properly, that we understand how they operate, and we're just really careful going into any financial vehicle. If you have any questions, feel free, reach out, give us a call. Happy to talk through it with you. Thanks.